bring value to each other and the communities that we're a part of.
TEDxRoxburyWomen means strength.
I spent a lot of time pacing back and forth and thinking, what can I do? But a few nights ago, it was Tuesday night, it was one of those nights where, as a mother, you're like, I'm not cooking, we're going out. So we went out, and my daughter loves burritos, so we went to go get a burrito. Go to a new burrito place, order our food, we sit down, she's sitting in front of me, and I can tell something's wrong. She's eating, she's quiet, she's not really making eye contact, she keeps looking down. So I look up to her, I look up to Nellie, 7 years old, and I say, Nellie, what's wrong? She kind of shrugs it off, nothing, Mama. She looks at me again, she says, Mama, I have something to tell you. Tell me, baby. Mama, someone at school said something to me today. A little girl told me that it's impossible for me to be here because my parents aren't married. I had to look my daughter in the eyes and figure out, what am I going to do? What do I say? Kind of slowly put my burrito back down, just looked at her and I said, Nellie, how do you feel about that? And she smiled. She smiled and she looked at me and she said, Mama, I felt nothing because I am the only expert on my life. Her birthday is in just a few weeks, so December is always a really powerful month for me. It's a month when I really get to reflect on what it's been like to be a mother. It's a time every year when I'm grateful and I think about all the things that I've accomplished and all of the amazing things that we've done together. But it's also a month when I have to really take a step back and think about the differences in how I'm parenting my daughter and how my parents raised me. And that's a really tough and challenging thing to do. See, I'm a first generation American, and I was raised by 2 Latino immigrant parents. My parents came to America from Brazil in the mid-1980s, and I really love sharing their immigration story because I often feel like immigrants are lumped into this one story, this one really devastating, leave their country because they're having a horrible life, come here to have a better life. So I share their story because everyone has a different story. My parents came here because my oldest brother, born in Brazil, was born with a hole in his heart, and there weren't doctors over there who could repair this. There weren't doctors over there who could save his life. So my parents packed up their things and moved to a country where they didn't know the language and they didn't know the people, to bring him here and have him go to a hospital here in Boston, and they were able to save his life. So they stayed in America, and a few years later, I was born. Don't remember that, but I know it happened. I was born, and being raised in America by 2 Latino immigrants came with a lot of lessons on stigma and shame and the realities of stereotyping. See, my parents, not knowing the language and having to survive and really wanting to accomplish so much more than what the stereotype is, they faced a lot of hardship in that. They really struggled. They struggled with that. And I remember oftentimes my parents coming home and feeling frustrated because their employers are making fun of their accents, or spending 20 minutes trying to help someone understand how to pronounce their own names. And they internalized that. They didn't feel like they could stand up for themselves. They didn't feel like they could stand up to that, so they internalized it. And by internalizing it, I honestly think that it affected the way they parented and they raised me. See, growing up, my parents told me I was white. So for almost my entire childhood and adolescence, I told people I was white. I told people I was white because my parents often told me, you were born here, you deserve everything that everyone else does, and you don't have to be like us. They didn't want me to face the same stigma, the judgment, and stereotyping that they felt. And they wanted us to be able to walk through life and be able to do things without feeling like someone might make fun of me because of my accent. So when they came home, they would tell me, we speak English only at home. And in turn, that meant my younger brother has no clue how to say certain things in Portuguese. having to internalize that as a young person was really, really hard. I mean, I was a young girl, and having to deal with all of the internal changes that were happening, and deal with all of the external things that were happening, and go through life thinking I'm white when I'm not, was hard. It was really hard. And it didn't actually occur to me until I left my very diverse community to go to an Irish Catholic high school to realize that I was not white. See, I remember being around 12 years old and feeling really ashamed of my parents and feeling really embarrassed that they had accents. And I remember people saying things like, well, they're immigrants, right? And me perpetuating that shame by saying, yeah, but they're different. And being a young girl and having to deal with all that, it affected how I perceived myself. And not just what I thought of myself, but everything down to my body. I remember being in high school and boys pointing out that I had wider hips than the white girls. And I hated that. I hated it because this was something I could not hide. I have the privilege of having white skin, and I can straighten my hair, and I can make myself look a certain way and walk through life and be able to take advantage of certain things. But I felt like, good God, hips, I can't have those. It was tough. And as an adolescent, and my parents feeling like they had to fit into this culture so much and they had to work so hard to make sure that we fit in, they even changed the way that I was raised. In their culture, things are different. But here they talk to me about relationships, love, and sex in my body in different ways. You see, I remember being young and my brother being in the same room as me, and my mother walking over to him and handing him a handful of condoms. I'm just at the other end of the room just watching, and in the same breath, my mother turned to me and said, "Those are not for you, you keep your legs closed." See, because I felt my parents were very strict, I had a hard time talking to them about certain things. I had a hard time opening up about the realities of my life. And so while my parents were here forbidding me from being in a relationship, they had no idea that I was already dating and honestly felt like I was in love. I couldn't talk to anyone about that love because this culture perpetuates the idea that young love is not real. This culture perpetuates the idea that young women don't know what they want. We're not empowered to make choices over our bodies. We're being told to say no. But if we tell young women to say no and no only, will they ever have the power to say yes? So you can imagine my parents, having spent 2 decades in America working really hard to shed this light of being immigrants, and working so hard to raise a daughter to be perceived as white by society so that she could move forward in life. So you can only imagine how hard it was for me to tell them when I was 17 years old that I was pregnant. It was probably the hardest day of my life to have to tell them I was pregnant. I was only 8 weeks or so when I told them, and the first things that they said to me were not what I was going to do or how I was feeling, but they told me that I was bringing them shame. My parents feeling that shame and having worked so hard to remove all these labels that they have felt, they did what was best for them. They felt like they really needed to do what was best for me, so they kicked me out. 17 years old, pregnant, kicked out, now forced to live with my boyfriend. It was tough. It was really tough because while I was walking around pregnant and people were telling me that I was ruining my life, people were high-fiving him. And because he was a Marine and he was going off to war, everybody was telling him how proud they were of him for starting a family young, but would look at me and assume I was promiscuous. I internalized so much of that. And it didn't stop just at home. It got worse at school. I remember starting my senior year of high school and looking at my class schedule and realizing that I was no longer in honors classes. So I went over to my guidance counselor's office and I said, "Excuse me, I think there's a mistake. I'm not in honors anymore." And she was just kind of sitting there, writing, not really making eye contact. She looked up, looked back down and said, "Oh honey, teen moms don't stay in honors." That was not okay. But I walked away, and it wasn't the last time something like that happened. I knocked back on her door a couple of months later and I said, "Excuse me, can you help me fill out a college application?" Again, not even making eye contact, not even acknowledging that I was in the room. She said, "Oh honey, let's see if you can even graduate first." Then I went back to my class, big belly, back to my class, crying, upset. My teacher points to me in front of the class. "This is what happens when you're irresponsible." That's what teen moms have to deal with these days. And I knew all of these things were not okay, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to handle it. So I went through life as a teen mom feeling like, what can I do? I'm in this negative environment. Everybody's telling me I won't make it, that there's nothing I can do to overcome. Do I give up? What do I do? It was hard. It was hard because in this culture, being a teen mom means you don't finish high school. Being a teen mom means you don't go to college. Being a teen mom means your boyfriend leaves you. Being a teen mom means your child won't succeed, that you won't get a good job, and God forbid, you will never enjoy being a mother. But I recognized how wrong this was. And I wanted to deconstruct and redefine what it meant to be a teen mom. So I ask you, what if being a teen mom meant that she would definitely finish high school? And what if being a teen mom meant, oh, she's going to college? And what if being a teen mom meant that she can do anything she wants to do? And what if being a teen mom meant that she's going to love being a mother? And what if we finally accepted that being a teen mom means she is also a valuable woman? It was hard to feel like I wasn't valuable. How could I not be valuable? I'm raising a person. How could I feel so shamed and stigmatized by people who were telling me, just a few months later that I was going to do anything I wanted to do? How do I move from that? So I challenge you all to think about how society perpetuates this idea of teen motherhood and what the realities are. Is she struggling because she's a teen mom? Or is she struggling because people are making her life so much harder than it has to be? Did I have to suffer as much as I did? Did my life have to be as hard as it was? I don't think it did. There are teen moms everywhere, and they all need support, and they all need people to empathize. Empathy is the only thing that can trump shame. Empathy is the only thing that can bring us together as humans. We are all humans, and we all want to feel like humans. Teen moms are no exception. So I leave you with this thought. What if we believed in them? What if we empathized? And what if you believe in me and believe that I'm going to be more than just a stereotype and more than a statistic? Thank you.
Contact with other humans in this space is amazing. And it's nothing short of a miracle.